Good morning and welcome back. Previously, we have studied LPG policy and we have started the topic industrial reforms. Today, we are going to study financial reform. So, let's have it. Financial reforms related to, if you remember, prior 1991, there was no such kind of any reforms in the financial sector except the banks were opened and the banks were being managed by the Reserve Bank of India. This after 1991, when the new economic policy were launched, financial reform being taken because of the problem, the adversity of the money sector and the all the inflow of the currency was too short, too low. So it was required to reform in this sector also. Financial sector is mainly related to all those financial institutions like commercial banks, all private bank, all merchant banks, investment banks, or if we talk about the foreign exchange market. These all things comes under financial sector or financial institution. Means those who are responsible to supply money in the economy, these are known as financial institutions, and these all institution is being controlled and managed by Reserve Bank of India, which is Central Bank of India. And what is the main role of Reserve Bank of India was at that time? It was that the RBI was like a regulator. They used to manage, means RBI was managing the all the banks, all the commercial banks or either any kind of financial institutions regarding the loans, giving or lending the loans or borrowing the loans, deciding about the rates and the other facility which is provided by the financial institution was under supervision of and under regulation of Reserve Bank of India. So let's see what reforms we have taken in this financial sector. So now, as I told, the most and foremost thing that Reserve Bank of India was wholesale responsible to take care of these all financial institutions. So it was very much necessary. We had to increase the power of the RBI, and the role of the RBI was one of the major reforms taken on the financial sector. Then after, previously we had only public sector. Public sector banks were those banks who started and completed the 10 years successfully and became nationalized. They are known as public sector. But now private sector was also given chance to open and invest their money into the financial sector. Even foreign investment and the new branches, these all reforms we have taken. We are going to see one by one these all topics so that you can understand clearly. Now let's understand what was the role previously and after year 1991, what role was given to Reserve Bank of India. If we can see in India, the major role of the Reserve Bank of India is to control and manage the all financial institution, including commercial banks and other banks. And RBI always RBI used to decide what will be the amount of money that commercial bank and other financial institution can lend to the people. And also RBI used to determine what will be the rate of interest, either deposit rate or either lending and borrowing rates. Before 1991, the role of RBI was like a regulator only. As I told, it was regulating, controlling everything they were doing and giving the directions. But after 1991, the RBI role was not only regulator, but it became from regulator to facilitator. Now, RBI was not wholesale responsible to regulation only, but it was facilitating, it was giving the guidelines, direction, and all the control and management was under hand of RBI. Previously, the financial sector was not allowed to do anything without the Reserve Bank of India. Now, RBI became a kind of facilitator. So, financial institution may allowed to take decision on many matters without the consultation of the Reserve Bank of India. Because If Reserve Bank of India was given all the wholesale power, it was very difficult to manage the entire institution, and some institution was not well managed and some institution was growing very much. So it was needed that Reserve Bank of India should be a supervisor, should be the topmost, and should be a facilitator, which can give the guidelines, which can give the idea and the ways how to manage and control and these all things, and let the other institution to become more sovereign and to become independent, little freedom, but the supervision will be done by the Reserve Bank only. Okay, but for this few small thing, they need not to contact and ask time and again for the decision. So now the role of RBI, in short we can say, was from regulator to facilitator. The second reforms was taken for the establishment of private sector. Private sector banks, as I told, those banks which is not run for the 10 years successfully, and it is controlled and managed by private sector, which is not nationalized by the government. And remember, all the banks are nationalized after the completion of 10 years, then only it become the government bank. Okay, and if any private bank is completed 10 years and want to be nationalized and want to give its share with the government sector, so it will become government bank. Okay, but the most of the time private sector do not want to share with the government, but they used to successfully done 10 years completion, so they become nationalized but in the private sector, like Axis Bank, HDFC Bank, ICICI, the top most private sector bank. These banks, before 1991, private sector banks were only they were not encouraged properly as public sector was encouraged. They were given more importance rather than private sector bank. But after 1991, to establish private sector bank, given more freedom. Liberalization means one second name you can say, liberalization means freedom. So it was given freedom to the private sector, and also from the foreign countries also they can open here the private sector banks. Like you must be having knowledge about the American bank or any kind of different kind of foreign banks are also here, who are working as a financial institution, and they are giving services here as a private sector bank. Okay, so two reforms I have explained under the financial reform. One, the role of RBI was now as a facilitator than the regulator, and there was the establishment of private sector bank. The third is foreign investment. If we see, before 1991, the foreign investment in India market was very low, and it was restricted. Why? Because we were following closed economic policy and also import substitution policy, which doesn't allowed the other countries to come into the India and invest their money. Means foreign investment was very low, and because of that our foreign exchange reserve gone in deficit. We have already discussed about that there was adverse scenario in the BOP and fiscal and foreign reserve also. After 1991, we have given liberalization to this field also. Now there was a lot of FII, means financial foreign institutional investment. It was nearest around 50%. 50% foreign investment increase in the country. FII, like merchant banks if we talk about, or mutual fund if we talk about, or any kind of pension fund we can include. These all funds included, and they were allowed to open their institution also and invest their money into the Indian economy. So foreign investment and allowing them was one of the major steps taken by the government. And fourth reform was setting up new branches. This is very important. Before 1991, for the opening up of any branches, any kind of unit, we had to acquire license or we had to ask permission from the government. But after 1991, it was totally removed. Before 1991, the every banks had to take approval from the RBI to open up their new branches wherever they want to open. But after 1991, it was not required. Only just a certain condition they had to fulfill, and after fulfilling those conditions, one can open, means freely they can open any branches without the approval of RBI. So these four reforms were taken to in the financial sector. Okay, let me remind you again what were the reforms taken under the financial sector. The role of RBI was now extended from the regulator to the facilitator. It was extended. Now he is not going to do all the work himself, but he is only going to give the guidelines and supervising, controlling, managing. Okay. Second, the private sector was open for the opening their financial institution. Third, we wanted to develop our financial conditions, so we invited foreign investment. And fourth, for the opening up of any kind of new branches, there was no requirement to ask the permission from the RBI. So this was financial reform. Now let's talk about the fiscal reforms. Fiscal reforms, what do you mean by fiscal word? Fiscal means total expenditure done by the government. Total expenditure. And if we talk about, in short, we can say fiscal means related to tax. Related to tax. Okay. So government have a two way to earn money. One, from the tax sources, whatever the tax applied in any sector, either direct tax or indirect taxes. Okay. And second, non-taxed. Okay. So if we talk about the income point of view, means fiscal related to tax, or if we talk about the expenditure point of view, the fiscal related to total expenditure done by the government. Okay. So now in the fiscal field, what reforms was taken by the government? If you remember, India was facing fiscal deficit, and this deficit was too high. Our total expenditure was much higher than the total income. So it was needed to do some major steps in this field. So what step we have taken, what reforms we have taken under new economic policy, that we had to reduce the tax rate under direct taxes and indirect. As I told, only two taxes we have. If we talk about popularly, which is applied in each and every things in our country, one is on direct. Direct taxes are those taxes which is directly borne on a people, and no intermediaries there, means a person's income and person's wealth, whatever they have, directly they have to pay to the government. Okay, this is called direct tax. And indirect taxes are those taxes in which the liability are imposed on third party, means the person is not liable to pay. The liability to tax payment is done by the third party. For example, if we are going to buy a certain commodity, with the price we used to pay taxes also, but we are not paying the tax to the government directly. We are paying to the shopkeeper, and shopkeeper on the behalf of us, they used to pay to the government. That is called indirect taxes. Okay. So now what reforms were taken under direct taxes or indirect taxes? Before 91, there was a continuous increase in tax rate. But after 91, what we did, because we felt that increasing the tax rate is enhancing tax evasion. Do you know the meaning of tax evasion? Tax evasion means when someone is not ready to pay the taxes and they are hiding their income status, and they are means this is called means stealing the tax. That is called tax evasion. It's a major word you need to learn, this economic word. So India was feeling that the increasing rate of tax is creating more and more tax evasion in the country, and this is the only reason. So they decided to decrease the tax rate, means that should be a moderate one, so that all the people will encourage and they will be ready to pay the taxes, because the government major earning source, major income source is only tax. Okay. Now indirect taxes, what reforms were taking? Again, indirect taxes, we all know it is implemented on the goods and services. Before 91, there was complexities to impose that indirect taxes. Right now, you all are very lucky that you are living in such an era that there is no complexities in indirect taxes now. Popularly, you all are knowing right now, we used to know GST, goods and service tax, is a part of indirect taxes. Previously, we had a wide variety of indirect tax, sale tax, central sale tax, excise duty, right? Custom duty. There are a number of indirect taxes was followed previously, and these were very complex to manage, to control, to maintain proper. So now, after 1991, reforms made in this field, and all the tax rate was reduced first, and then after it was decided to make a common national market for the taxes. And for that, government has implemented VAT. You must be having knowledge about the value added tax, was came after that only. Okay, and the third reforms was taken to simplifying the tax paying procedure. This was also one of the very complex tasks. Previously the people were not able to understand how to fill the forms and prepare the tax calculation sheet, and even to show their statement of their earning was also very difficult. So after 1991, it was decided to simplify tax paying procedure. I should give you one example that previously the tax paying procedure was done in a very wide kind of forms, and these forms were having around 20-24 pages. It was sometime it was 50 pages if your asset is too large. But after 1991, a 2D form, that is called SARAL, SARAL, SARAL form was introduced, and it was only single page form, and in that person can explain their details of their income, and they can show their what is the tax they have to pay. So it was decided that India should follow the simplest way, easiest way to pay the tax, and there should not be so much complexity, so that people can encourage and they start paying the taxes to the government. So overall, what was the fiscal reform? Fiscal reforms related to the tax, and under that we had to study three type of reform. One, there was the reduction in direct taxes. Direct tax rate was reduced, and indirect taxes were also reduced. Now the tax rate was low than the previous, and also we have decided to bring the common national market for the goods and services. And third, the procedure for the tax paying was also simplified. So this was fiscal reforms. Now let's see about the foreign exchange reforms, what we did. If you remember, I have explained you that time the foreign deficit, which we foreign exchange reserve, was too high. If you remember the data which I gave you, it was around 2,200 approx in before 1991, and still 1990 it was around 17,200 approx. So it was huge. We had a deficit in the foreign exchange reserve. So we wanted to do some major changes, major reforms in this field. So two major changes were taken. First of all, it was decided to devalue our Indian currency. I hope you all are acquainted very well with this word. You are familiar what is the meaning of devaluation. Devaluation means decreasing the rate of domestic currency by the government, okay, not by the market force. Market, when it is done by the market force, what is called depreciation. Okay, so devaluation of rupee was decided to do. If you remember, before 1991, India was badly hit by, as I told, by the international condition also, and within nation also, we were very badly hit by the BOP condition. So after that, we reduced the value of domestic currency, means government decided to reduce the domestic currency in terms of foreign currency, so that export can encourage and import can discourage. We need not to buy lot thing from the foreign market, and we can increase our export. Okay. And second was decided that the foreign exchange rate will be decided by the market force, not by the government. Previously, we were following the fixed rate system. So most of, not fixed rate, means most of the things we were decided to determine by the government itself. So it's a part of fixed rate. Afterwards, we decided to follow the managed floating rate. I have already explained you what is called managed floating rate, in which partial government and partial market force both interact and decide the rate of exchange. So most of the rate of exchange in India that time was started by market forces, means as per the demand and supply of foreign exchange, and also in the supervision of government. So this was foreign exchange reforms. Now I have explained you entire 4 reforms. This is the last reform, that is trade and investment policy reforms. If we talk about domestic trade or the international trade, if you are going to see here, most of the reforms is related to international only. And if you remember previously, we had a quota system, import substitution. If you remember, tariff and quota was two major thing in that. And quota was related to the quantities which we are going to import from the other country. There was a restriction on quantity. So now what happened? This restriction was dismantled totally. It was removed from the export and import both. Now liberalization aimed at removal of these quantity restrictions from the April 2001. And the second, tariff, if you remember, the tariff rate previously we had kept very high so that people should not go and buy from the foreign country, they should discourage. But now the tariff on import was reduced, and it was just to enhance the domestic trade. So we did some of the changes in trade and investment also. For third, we can say, was the removal of procedure on imports. Previously, for the doing import and export, we had to acquire license. Without license, without the government approval, you could not be able to do any kind of trade in international market. Now, this license acquire compulsion was removed. Now there is no need to have any kind of approval or any kind of licensing procedure for the import, except those material which are hazardous, which are bad for the environment or for the country. For that they had to acquire permission from the government, then only they can buy those material. Okay, next, removal of export duty. Previously was applying duties on export, whether it's export or import. The duty, now the trade can be duty free. There is no, up to certain amount we had no need to pay any kind of duty. But yes, if there is any certain commodity which is not beneficial or which is very very costly one or very precious one, which is on that only duty is applied. Otherwise, import and export both are duty free now. So in short, if we see the trade and investment policy reforms, we'll see that the restriction on quotas, means quantitative restriction on import and export, was removed, and the tariff rates were decreased, and even on that was totally, import was totally free, duty free. Even export duty we also removed, and there was removal of licensing procedure for the import. So this much we have studied today. If in short, I'm going to explain you again that we have studied today financial reforms. In that we have studied four type of reforms: RBI changes in RBI, private sector establishment, foreign investment, and the setting up of new branches. Then after we studied about the fiscal reforms. In that we have studied about related to taxes, direct and indirect. Then after we have studied about the this sector, foreign exchange reforms. In that, devaluation of rupee we have seen, and also in the trade and investment reform we have seen how we opened the economy properly. We followed open economy, and we reduced the tariffs and quotas, and also we reduced the duties and on export and imports. So this was for today's. From next video we will start privatization. Till, if any doubt, any kind of questions you want to ask, you can comment, you can ask in the comment box, or you can message me between this time which I have mentioned over here. And I'm hoping that you all are making notes also, because time is very crucial. And after the opening of the school, I'm going to check your notes copy. So complete all your notes, whatever I have been taught till today. We'll meet in next video. Till then, have a good day.